At 70 years old, Kevin Costner has finally broken the silence about the one man who shaped his career in ways the world never knew, Robert Redford. For decades, fans believed their connection was built on admiration, respect, and classic Hollywood storytelling. But the truth, the real truth, is far more complicated and far more emotional than anyone imagined. Costner's journey began long before fame, long before awards, long before the world knew his name. Born Kevin Michael Costner on January 18, 1955, he was raised in a humble working-class home where dreams felt too far away to touch. His father, William Costner, worked long hours as an electrician. His mother, Sharon Ray, cared for those who had nothing. And in that small California household, Kevin learned early what struggle looked like and what ambition required. Yet even then, he held on to a quiet fire inside him, a belief that one day he would step into a much bigger world. What he didn't know was that this journey would eventually lead him to a man who both opened doors for him and silently closed others. A man he admired, a man he trusted, a man he would one day reveal the truth about. At 70, Kevin Costner finally breaks his silence and reveals truth about the one man who shaped his career more than the world ever knew, Robert Redford. Long before the Oscars, the fame, and the global admiration, Kevin Costner was just a quiet boy from a working-class California family, moving from town to town as his father chased stable work. Those early years hardened him, taught him how to stand tall in uncertainty, and gave him the resilience that would one day define his presence on screen. But Kevin didn't grow up dreaming of Hollywood. He studied marketing, worked odd jobs, and lived with the quiet belief that ordinary life was all he'd ever know, until a single moment changed everything. On a routine flight, he crossed paths with actor Richard Burton, and the brief encounter shook him to his core. Something awakened in him that day, pushing him toward a destiny he'd never imagined for himself. He threw himself into acting classes, rehearsed in cramped community theaters, and survived on determination more than money. Nothing came fast, nothing came easy, but Costner refused to quit. His early roles went unnoticed, his scenes were cut, and Hollywood nearly overlooked him completely. Then fate struck again. Director Lawrence Kasdan remembered the young actor's quiet intensity and cast him in Silverado. In that moment, Kevin Costner's rise truly began. From there, the man who once doubted his future became the symbol of American heroism on screen, steady, sincere, and unshakably human. Roles in The Untouchables, Bull Durham, and Field of Dreams transformed him from a hopeful newcomer into a force of nature. And when he made Dances with Wolves, he did the impossible. He acted, directed, produced, and delivered a masterpiece that won 7 Academy Awards, redefining Hollywood's expectations of what one man could accomplish. Yet behind all these triumphs stood one constant, quiet influence: Robert Redford. And now, after decades of speculation and silence, Kevin Costner is finally ready to share the truth. Kevin Costner's first great love story began long before the world knew his name, before the Oscars, before the fame, before the iconic roles that turned him into America's cinematic hero. There was Cindy Silver, the college sweetheart who believed in him when he had nothing but dreams and stubborn determination. They met at California State University, Fullerton, and from the beginning, Cindy became the steady, grounding force in his life, while Kevin juggled small theater roles, night classes, and odd jobs just to afford rent and gas. Cindy stood by him, cheering him through every rejection. Costner himself later admitted that in those early years, when his acting career looked impossible, it was Cindy's unwavering faith that kept him going. Their marriage in 1978 ushered in a decade defined by hope, sacrifice, and the quiet promise that together, they could survive anything. As Costner slowly carved his way through Hollywood, Cindy built their home, raised their children, and held the fort through endless auditions and long months of uncertainty. When Kevin finally broke into the mainstream with The Untouchables, Bull Durham, and Field of Dreams, their lives transformed overnight. The man once struggling to pay bills was suddenly a global star. But with fame came temptation, distance, and the pressure that cracks even the strongest foundations. Despite Cindy's loyalty, the constant travel, long shoots, and unavoidable rumors surrounding a rising leading man placed immense strain on their marriage. By 1994, after 16 years together and 3 children, the couple divorced, a heartbreak that Kevin described as the toughest loss of his life. He openly admitted that his obsession with work, combined with the relentless demands of Hollywood, had created a distance he didn't know how to close. Yet he never stopped speaking of Cindy with gratitude and tenderness, calling her incredible, and acknowledging that she helped build the man he became years later. Costner entered a new chapter when he married Christine Baumgartner, a poised, elegant handbag designer who fell in love with him long after his star had risen. Their relationship wasn't without challenges, including a brief split when Kevin feared he could no longer be the man she needed. But Christine's quiet strength and patience eventually brought him back. They married in 2004 and built a blended family filled with children, ranch life, and a softer, more reflective version of Costner. This marriage carried him through the revival of his career, through Yellowstone, through music tours with Modern West, and through some of the most peaceful years of his life. Kevin often said that Christine helped him rediscover the simple joys he'd lost in the chaos of fame. The sound of his children's laughter, the beauty of slow mornings, the comfort of knowing you are loved without conditions, even when their marriage ultimately ended in 2023. With headlines speculating and cameras chasing every detail, Costner handled it with the same grace and dignity that had defined him for decades. No accusations, no bitterness, no spectacle, only a man trying to protect his family and move forward quietly through all his triumphs, heartbreaks, and reinventions. Kevin Costner's romantic journey reveals a truth deeper than any movie role. Behind the rugged cowboy image, behind the legendary Hollywood icon, is a man who has loved deeply, lost painfully, and continued searching for connection and meaning. And each chapter, Cindy, Christine, and the years in between shaped him into the Kevin Costner the world admires today. Wiser, gentler, and unafraid to finally speak honestly about the relationships that built him. The couple built a life together, raising their 3 children, Annie, Lily, and Joe, while Kevin Costner's star continued to rise at a breathtaking pace. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, as Costner became one of Hollywood's most magnetic leading men through films like Dances with Wolves, Field of Dreams, and The Bodyguard, Cindy remained a steady and loyal presence by his side. She attended premieres, supported him during long production schedules, and helped create a stable home life while his fame grew to global proportions. But as Kevin's career accelerated, so did the distance between them. Endless months away on film sets, the strain of public visibility, and the relentless demands of stardom slowly began eroding the foundation of their marriage. By 1994, after 16 years together and countless attempts to repair what was breaking, the couple announced their divorce, a highly public and emotionally painful separation that resulted in an $80 million settlement, one of the most talked about in Hollywood history. Despite the enormity of the moment, both Kevin and Cindy chose respect over bitterness, committing themselves to raising their children together with grace. Costner would later describe that chapter as one of deep reflection, a period when he realized how difficult it could be to balance ambition with family, and how much he had learned about love, sacrifice, and accountability. Nearly a decade later, Kevin Costner found love again with Christine Baumgartner, a striking and accomplished model and handbag designer nearly 20 years younger than him. They had first crossed paths in the 1990s, but it wasn't until the early 2000s that their connection turned into something undeniable. Tabloids predicted the relationship would collapse under pressure, some questioned their age gap, while others doubted Kevin's willingness to settle into domestic life again after the emotional turbulence of his first marriage. But Christine proved to be a grounding force in his life, bringing calm, clarity, and a renewed sense of joy. Their relationship wasn't without hurdles. They briefly split after disagreeing about having children. Christine wanted a family, while Kevin feared repeating the personal struggles of his past. Yet love pulled them back together, and Kevin eventually realized that the future they imagined together mattered more than the fear that held him back. They married in September 2004 in a stunning ceremony at Costner's Aspen Ranch, a celebration that blended Western elegance with Hollywood romance. Over the years, they welcomed 3 children, Caden, Hayes, and Grace, expanding Kevin's family to 7 and giving him a second chance at fatherhood later in life. This new chapter softened him, transformed him, and brought him closer to the quiet, grounded life he always wanted. Christine stood beside him through career highs, including his explosive television comeback in Yellowstone, where he portrayed the rugged patriarch John Dutton, a role that mirrored his real-life devotion to protecting family, land, and legacy. Together, they created a partnership defined not by fame, but by stability, love, and the kind of peace Costner spent decades searching for. As Kevin Costner stands at 70, reflecting on a lifetime of unforgettable characters and cinematic triumphs, his words about Robert Redford feel less like a tribute and more like a confession long kept in the quiet corners of his heart. In a world where egos clash and legends compete, Costner breaks the silence with rare honesty, acknowledging the man who shaped not just his career, but his understanding of what true artistry looks like. Redford wasn't simply a Hollywood giant to him. He was the lighthouse in the storm, a reminder that greatness isn't loud. It whispers, it guides, it inspires quietly. Costner admits that whenever he felt uncertain whether directing Dances with Wolves, leading massive epics, or stepping into the rugged skin of John Dutton, he would hear Redford's calm, steady influence echoing in the background. "Find the truth," Redford would always say, and Costner carried those words into every frame he ever directed. What makes their bond extraordinary is that it was never built on fame, publicity, or Hollywood politics. It grew in the quiet places and ranches, in long conversations about American landscapes, fatherhood, storytelling, and the responsibility of being a voice that millions listen to. They both loved the West, not as scenery, but as a living, breathing part of who they were. 2 men, 2 storytellers, shaped by wide-open skies and the silence that teaches more than fame ever can. Costner admits now, with the humility of a man who has lived enough to understand what truly matters, that Robert Redford was the guiding star he never fully thanked. "If anything I've ever made touched someone," he said, It's because of men like Robert who showed me the way. For Costner, Redford wasn't competition, he was the blueprint, not just for filmmaking, but for living with purpose, with courage, and with integrity in an industry that often forgets the meaning of those words. That, as he moves into the twilight years of a remarkable career, Costner's gratitude reveals a truth as heartfelt as any film he has made. Robert Redford didn't just inspire him, he helped shape the man he became. A friendship forged in respect, sustained by shared vision, and remembered with a depth that only grows stronger with time. And maybe that is why Costner chose to finally speak now, because some truths deserve to be said before the curtain falls. In honoring Robert Redford, he also honors his own journey. A journey made brighter, steadier, and more meaningful because one man chose to light the path before him.